Okay, here we'll go through our 6 basic chart patterns that will cover somewhere between 80 and 90% of market conditions you encounter. Obviously we've done all the work we can on finding the correct chart size and making sure the range we are looking at has sufficient risk-reward ratio involved. This one's simply a 50V, so we can see we've squared the market. We've waited for 50% of volume to be traded before we consider our entry. We obviously want our swing low above or to the right of the R line, and we get our entry signal here with buyers beating sellers. You can see we're inside last square, inside predicted angle of achievement, straightforward type of entry. We've waited for 50% of the volume that was created here to be used coming back down here before we enter the trade. Obviously you can see the further it is here, the stronger the current setup is, because that amount of selling has only achieved this amount of price reduction. Now this next point is mentioned when we're talking about when we're using a chart size that is too fast for current achievement, but we don't take any long entries inside this 25% box here. I have found over looking at numerous examples that if we take long entries, even though they exist in this 25% box here, they have a higher tendency of failure. We will wait for a breakout of the top to take an entry in this area. This actually presents a high risk but high reward potential trade. If we have a retracement down here and we have our exit signal here, and then we come back up to this top here, then it has to be over square from here to here, and we have a higher double top. You can sell this higher double top. Just be aware of what you're doing. It's a high risk trade. These 3 examples here are just standard variations of the 50V trade highlighted in the first example. You can see here we've come down just inside and we've touched 50% line of the range coming up. That's Gann's magic number, provided we come back inside our predicted target angle and last square, we will take that trade. This one here, we've come down inside, then we've come over here, failed to achieve the same angle of achievement here in the same direction and the same actual price achievement at predicted volume. You can see we've come back up inside last square and also in predicted target angle. It's another variation of the 50V trade. Just a note on this one, when you can't quite work out what's going on, look where the market wants to go and where it doesn't want to go. You often see a straight run and then you'll see a set of stairs. You know, the market goes up or down on the left and then it reacts what can look like a set of stairs. This is our plus 25 hot entry setup. What we're finding is that when we're waiting for our 50% of volume to expire before we looked for entry, we're missing too many potential trades in here. But what we also found was that some of them were false entries. So what we decided to make a rule of was that if all the existing conditions met our entry criteria here, and we waited until they made 25% of the predicted target range. So if we've got 40-point range up here, 10 points from this low, if it occurred inside this box before the 50% of volume was used, and we had the buyers beating sellers with speed inside last square, inside predicted target angle, we would take our entry. This is a hot setup. More often than not, you'll find this exists when the low comes down somewhere here and then accelerates up through here. This trade here is our 50 failure stop and reverse. So what we're finding is that we have trades coming, we have an entry, we get through 50% of our predicted volume, we fail to get above our predicted target. The market turns over and where the stop is actually becomes an entry for a reverse direction trade. So if we're trading long here, market fails, more often than not it's going to fail around about the last high, but it's not an exact requirement. It's more to do with the conditions of where we are in comparison to the prediction. We can open a trade and trade in the opposite direction here. Obviously you should be able to see by now that you have a higher chance of this trade 50 FS and R working if we come from a position of weakness down here. So rather than turning here at a reasonably strong position, we're turning down here or around here, then the turn here is going to be a stronger potential opposite direction trade. Obviously it's got to be outside last square, outside predicted target angle, past 50% of predicted volume, then you have sellers beating buyers inside last square here. Looks like a complex setup, but it's not a straightforward trade. This is our what's the opposite trade. So again, fairly similar to the last trade, except the difference will be that we never got an entry into the long trade. So what we're saying is we should have had a setup here that tells us the market was in an upward move, and we're expecting a reaction somewhere down here and then a long entry. Now if we had a reaction down along square and then didn't get a long entry, the reason for that will be that the buyers trying to come back up are meeting too much resistance from offer, so they're pushing the price horizontally sideways, and then when they do give an entry, they're more than likely going to be to the right of the predicted target angle or the last square, or both. So in an example where it comes down square and doesn't get back inside, the reason is that something's changed. People prepared to offer are absorbing the buying pressure, pushing price sideways. Then it simply becomes a what's the opposite. We get something come up here, turns over, we get an entry, we take a trade in the opposite direction. Where you can see here where it's come straight down, well then obviously we never had a setup here to look for a long, because our reaction would come back inside square too rapidly. We trade these here providing there's sufficient risk-reward ratio to the 50% of the big P. This is our not so dumb entry. I've written on the website what I believe a dumb entry is. Basically a dumb entry is when we don't read any of the current chart conditions and we decide to sell at a previous high or buy at a previous low. I said without taking into account any of the current chart conditions or current achievement on the chart. So quite simply, I'm prepared to sell at this high if all these existing conditions have been met. I want the reaction to come from 75% of the last range, so obviously the market is weak to allow the price to come all the way back down here. Then I want the price at this point to be over the last square, so that would be the last square. I want it to the right of the predicted target, so that's the predicted target from here to here, and then I'm prepared to sell at that price. Obviously the further it is across our predicted volume, the stronger the chance of this price holding. Reason for that is don't step in front of trains. If we've got this amount of commitment here, those buyers are more than likely still going to be participating in the market. So if we can get to this point past our predicted volume, we have a stronger chance of that price holding. If this was a first out new high for the day, new high for the range, new high for 3 or 4 weeks if you're in end of day trading, you have a reaction back down to here, which is the last swing low, and we'd still want this to be over square to buy it. So that's our basic chart setups. We're relying everything on being square or over square. We're looking at where the market is in comparison to where it's come from, and we're looking at where it is now in comparison to where it's supposed to be. We're formulating opinions on market strength, exit strength, entry strength, and we've done all this using the accuracy of volume in comparison to the inefficient time as an increment of measurement.